Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Parker, and I'm introducing and also running, admitting everybody as they are joining. So to the meeting, I would like to introduce Dr. Kim Prather. She's the Distinguished Chair in Atmospheric Chemistry and Distinguished Professor at UC San Diego, with joint appointments at Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. She is the founding director of two major research centers, the NSF Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry and the Environment, and the Meta Institute for Airborne Disease in a Changing Climate. She is also an elected member to both the National Academy of Science and the National Academy of Engineering. She has also been my neighbor. Hang on just a second. She's also been my neighbor for the last 20 years. And she missed one of our neighborhood parties because earlier this last year, because she was due to some field research she was doing down by the border. So we're very pleased and honored to have Kim talk to us today about her work down by the border, as our group, like Anna has said, has been very interested in the Tijuana River crisis. So thank you for coming, Kim. Take it away.
Thank you for having me. So it's great to be here and talk about what has become my my favorite topic. It's a little painful to talk about at times, but I am going to give you all sort of a big overview and an update with the very latest data, hot off the press, of what's going on down at our border, and a little bit of thoughts on why. And towards the end, to the thing, right? I have invited a pediatrician from the area who will comment about some of the health effects of the issues down there. And I noted there's a couple of other doctors from the area. It's a very close-knit community. I've gotten to be very attached to this community, shall we say. I feel very passionately about this topic, and as I tell people, we're not stopping until... Okay, so this is the title. It's not very... it's very descriptive. It's not very exciting in some ways, but hopefully everybody will be up to speed by the time I'm done. So I think everybody's well aware that there was and has been a state of emergency in this region. I used to always just refer to it as Imperial Beach because that, until I sort of spent time down there, that was the main area that I knew was impacted. And I got to know the mayor, who's here. Welcome, Mayor. But I've since learned more about the neighborhoods and, which are parts of San Diego, which are parts of Imperial Beach. And so it's a much broader area that's being impacted. I should say by the time I'm done presenting the data that we have, you'll see that it impacts people. I know that this is the League of Women Voters that includes North County. The air comes all the way up to us. And so, this is a serious issue for all of San Diego County. So basically, I don't think I have to give too much. I think you said you've had quite a few people speaking about this. I'll just remind everyone that due to really high bacteria levels, the beaches in this region, down in the southern region near the border, were closed for over 1,000 days. And I'll touch on that towards the end because we got to actually see them open for a little while, and that was hope, but now they're closed again. And again, we think we understand why now. So the big question that we set out to address, people were largely focused on coastal water quality and thought that, and think that around the world, people think that the way you get impacted by pollution in water is you go in the water or you go to the beach or you swim, but basically nobody had really thought about, which parts does anything from the water make it into the air? And if so, how does that affect air quality? So I started thinking about this some time ago. I think we started thinking about 2015. Excuse me, I was running the center, this National Science Foundation Center, where we were looking at how bacteria and viruses can get released into the air. And so, basically we'd been working on it for quite some time, kind of trying to understand, what gets out, and if it gets out, what happens if we inhale these different airborne microbes. And so that's where I sort of got brought into this problem. And you can see sort of the region that's impacted, where flow goes in from the Tijuana River into the Pacific Ocean, billions of gallons. 2023, as I'll mention, was a record-setting year. I think it was 44 billion gallons of sewage and waste went into our Pacific Ocean down at this border. And most people, shockingly aren't that aware of it. It's very known in our community in, San Diego. Maybe it's getting let out more in California, but I scratch my head on why this does not have more attention from a federal level. And again, we can talk about that towards the end. So it has been receiving more and more coverage in the local community. There's some great people. I think some of them are on this call that have done a great job covering it. But I will just say that, once, if I should say, but once we determine this pollution is getting into the air, it can affect many, many more people. And, like I think half of the world's population lives near a water body. And so if pollution is getting out of that water and traveling over, air can travel miles. Aerosols, the research that I've done for 30 plus years, we've shown that aerosols can travel all the way around the globe. It takes about 2 weeks, but the air can travel a lot further. And for those of you who heard about the 6 feet during COVID, yes, aerosols travel further than 6 feet. I was very involved. I was the one that convinced Fauci that COVID was airborne. But back to this. So one of the points I've been making over and over is we filter our water before we drink it. We choose which water we go into. We choose which food we eat if we can, but we don't get to choose the air we breathe, and we breathe a lot more air. We're exposed to and inhale up to 11,000 liters of air per day versus 2 liters of water. And we don't seem to worry so much about filtering it, although luckily I think that's slowly changing. But our number one exposure pathway to environmental pollutants is the air by far. And so, we started thinking about this. I mentioned the oceanographers at Scripps. My colleagues were doing work. And basically what they did was they released a dye. You might have heard of this study. It was called Seaside. And they were releasing dye into the ocean. It's a non-toxic dye. And what they wanted to see was how far does that dye travel? Does it just float out into the ocean and it's gone? Or can it get trapped in the surf zone? And what we're interested in is, does that dye make it into the air? Basically, the dye simulates pollution. And what we found was, yeah, it does get into, when it gets trapped in the surf zone, those breaking waves where you see all that white, those white caps, those are bubbles. And when those bubbles pop, they release the material that's sort of enriched in the surface. And that tends to be sort of a lot of biological material, a lot of gooey material that doesn't like water. All of that can get released and heavily enriched in the air. And then once it's in the air, it can travel and impact a lot more people than just those going to the beach. So again, in the center that I direct, CASE, the National Science Foundation Center, this was a 14-year center, $40 million looking at this question of, how do things get out of the ocean? Thinking more, people tend to think about the ocean or the air, but they don't always look at the fact that they communicate. You can't really, in this day and age, you can't hide the pollution that is present. There's some beliefs that you've heard the term dilution is the solution to pollution. Well, that's not always the case. And so, basically we were very interested from the case perspective. We studied for a long time which of the microbes were getting out. We have this massive facility. If any of you ever want to come visit, we have a huge facility with winds and waves and 36,000 gallons of seawater that we use to study the ocean in isolation and try and understand which pollutants are becoming airborne. So we had this background, but when you think about the border, when you think about the polluted coastal region, you have to think about more things being in that water. And these are just examples. There's industrial waste, agricultural waste, treated and untreated sewage, all up and down the coast. And, as part of that, you see all these different things: insecticides, fertilizers, solvents, drugs. And I'll talk more about this, as well as viruses and bacteria, which are the things that I've spent a lot of my career studying. So the question is, what gets out? Not everything gets out, only about 20%. It's actually pretty selective. And so we've been working on trying to understand what becomes airborne. And then once it's in the air, how far is it traveling and who is being impacted has been the question of our research. So you may have heard about this. This made the news, and this kind of, I think, woke people up to this being a broader issue than just Imperial Beach. Basically, we started thinking about, you heard a lot during COVID about wastewater surveillance, looking at, we could actually get an early hint when a certain disease was coming to our community by looking at what was in the sewage. Our question became, what happens when that sewage becomes airborne? And so we basically did genomic sequencing of the microbes that were present in the air in Imperial Beach. And we did sequencing of the microbes that were present in the Tijuana River. And what we found was perfect match with between what was in the air and what was in the water. And up to 76% of the bacteria that you breathe in the air in Imperial Beach come from that river, come from the pollution in that river. So this, this paper was published, it came out in March of 2023. It got quite a bit of attention. But, again, it shouldn't have been a surprise, I have to say, because just listen to the community. And I'll say that over and over, just listen to the community. The community, you set foot in that community for 30 minutes and you are overwhelmed by people that are overwhelmed by this problem and have been for decades. This all started happening, in the 30s. And so, you know, they are worn down, they are tired, and many of them are very, very sick. I went down there for a month. Carol mentioned, where I was there constantly, and I still have, a cough that just doesn't want to go away. I mean, it's very, very serious down there. So besides bacteria and viruses, the biological species that we get into the air, what about chemicals? So this just shows ocean concentrations of what we measured. Different antibiotics, different drugs, cocaine, methamphetamine, sunscreen is actually really abundant in the coastal water. But the take home from this is that, and this paper is under review in Science Advances, but basically if you have a higher ocean concentration, you have more in the air. So the water pollution is definitely making it into the air. Things that we probably don't want to be breathing are present in the air in this region. So let's fast forward. I promised an overview of the latest, greatest, and this is our most recent study. I should say we're still down there making measurements. We decided not to pull the plug after what we found, and so I'll talk about that here now. Basically, we went there because all of our studies were done in the winter. And in the winter, you get super, except for this winter, you get intense rainstorms, and they're becoming more and more intense. There are these atmospheric rivers, and those lead to massive flow in that river. The infrastructure cannot handle it. And so, as I mentioned, billions of gallons, sometimes billions of gallons in one day can make it through the river and into the ocean. And so we spent a lot of time sampling, very heavy focus at that point on the bacteria and viruses. And so this time we're going in the quote dry season, when the river's not supposed to be flowing unless it rains. And it didn't rain this summer, note. And so at that time, there was this, we went in about late August and we did our measurements in September. And then when we got there, and right before we got there, we started just hearing the community complaints. It was making the news that there was this massive, the odor's always been there, but it was really, really seemed to have gotten much worse. People were complaining of, the smell, headaches, anxiety, not being able to sleep, respiratory issues, skin issues, infections, all kinds of things. And, noting that when we got there, we were putting brackets out, and this is the copper brackets we used. And within 48 hours, they looked like this. That is, from a chemist perspective, which I'm a chemist, that is a heavy amount of oxidation that's going on these surfaces. And so that was our first clue. Something is really not good that's in that air. And so it made the LA Times. Is there a question?
Sorry, do you have a presentation you wanted to share?
Is it not? Oh, shit. Are you, shoot, you're not, it's not showing? I've been showing, oh no. Are you kidding? Oh my goodness. It shared the wrong window. Oh no. Terrible.
Good, Kim. It's okay.
Oh my goodness. I had such good figures. Hide. Okay. Sorry about that. We'll go back. I'm going to flip through really fast. We'll just do the fat world. We'll do the Reader's Digest condensed version. That's my title. Imperial Beach, South Bay emergency. The beaches have been closed. Let me get rid of this. I'm so sorry. I pushed the wrong button. I've done enough of these. I can't believe it. Someone should have been screaming. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, so pollution, and then This is the region. Does the water impact the air? I'm so sorry. This was all backing up what I was saying. This is the quote. I'm trying to find, okay, get this out of there. Okay. So this was my main sort of punchline. You inhale 11,000 liters of air a day versus 2 liters of water that you drink. And this is the seaside study. So here you can actually see the dye gets released, but sometimes the dye gets trapped in the surf zone. And when it gets trapped in the surf zone, that is when it can get released into the air when the waves crash. If it goes out to sea, that's good for the air, not good for the ocean. And so this was our initial involvement in looking at the dye. But then we moved to pollution. And as I say, this is the pollution that's in the coastal waters. This is the work we did in CASE, trying to understand which bacteria, microbes get transferred to the air. And then when you get down to the border, you start to see all of these other things, agricultural waste, industrial waste, treated and untreated, all up and down the coast. There's outfalls, as many of you know. And so then the question is, once it gets in the air, how many more people is it impacting? I'm so sorry, I'm almost caught up. And then this just shows the bacteria paper that I mentioned, where we showed up to 76% of the bacteria that you breathe in the air come from the water. Now I think I'm caught up. And oops, yeah, I was waiting for the gasps because people usually gasp when I get to this slide. This shows the drugs and the drug concentrations, as well as microplastics, biocides. And basically, if you have more, take home more in the ocean going this way, you get more in the air. And you can see that here. So this is a paper that we have under review that will hopefully get published very, very soon. So now I'm back. Okay, so basically, summer 2024, many different health effects were out there. This is the copper and how much it gets oxidized just being out for 48 hours. It's actually noticeably oxidized after just 24. And we have to think about it. We're breathing this air. And so that is what's making many people have, as often described, burning lungs. So this is finally, it did get some bigger coverage. After we'd been sampling for a while, a writer basically published a really nice article. And as I say, we did all of our measurements starting on September 1st. And so this is what we identified as a hot spot in the river. And you see this foam. And this is a local resident who also is a big advocate and major helper in this project. But you can see that, when we're there, we're wearing gas masks for a reason. The stench near the river is overwhelming and it really does burn your lungs and people often get dizzy. I mean, the levels of pollutants coming out of that water at this point, this is what's called the Saturn Boulevard crossing. And we went there thinking we were going to study the ocean. I mentioned that's what we'd always focused on. But when we got there, the residents said, there's something else going on. The smells are coming from this location here. And it turns out, as I'll show, there's a waterfall, a place where the water falls out of these pipes, as I'll show in a second. So where are we? So we started sampling at Border Field, and we put our mobile lab down here, and then we didn't see what we thought we would see. And so my students were talking, Ben Rico led this, and he was basically talking to local residents who said, come over here. This is the Saturn Boulevard crossing, and this is where the smell is, and the most of the smell. This seems to be a key spot. And so we set up another site, and we put our mobile lab at a ranch that's located on Leon. For those of you who know the area, it's in the Nestor community, because we wanted to see what people in the community were actually being exposed to. And this is the closest neighborhood to this hotspot. I should mention we had a great team of people. There's nearly 50 scientists involved in this project. San Diego State, Paula Stigler-Granados jumped in and started helping, as well as others, with collecting the samples. We were collecting water from the ocean, the river, multiple times a day, air samples all over the region. And so many, many people helped, including, I should add, the community itself. We put our samplers, as I'll mention towards the end, in various people's houses. We collected dust. Beatrice, who is a postdoc in my group, they interviewed people about their experiences. But note that the odor reports hit a record level of over 200 per day while we were doing this study. So this shows the pipes where the water comes out. This shows the infamous foam that has now been discussed quite a bit. Point is, you can see on this picture, you can see the foam from space. And so this is turbulence. And that turbulence has been shown in wastewater treatment plants to efficiently transfer a lot of pollution, gases and aerosols, bioparticles, into the air and pollutants. And so suddenly, as I say, our shift moved from the ocean to the river. And this was the location that we were sampling along Saturn Boulevard. So this is the pipe, one of the pipes. There's 4 of them. 2 or 3 of them are usually going. 4th one seems to be not functioning. But you can see there's quite high flow. And you can see the white foam. And to me, I see that as an aerosol scientist and say aerosols. That's where the bacteria and viruses and pollution aerosols are getting airborne, as well as that's how you clean gases out of wastewater. You drop them through a drop in the sewer system. And so this is the point where a lot of things are being released. So it shows, this is a map. It's got, I just want to make the point, we did measurements from September 1st to 23rd. We're still doing measurements, as I mentioned. These little blue dots are schools. And what you see is schools are, very close to this site. So I think thousands of kids are being exposed to this, especially since it's a nighttime phenomenon, which I will talk about, an early morning phenomenon. So again, here's the foam. This is the site where we are located now and doing measurements. Okay, now, so here's the punchline. So basically, this shows what is known as one of the most toxic sewer gases. Everybody, this is the one they first point to because it's the one that smells like rotten eggs. And everybody, it's part of the problem. It's not the entire problem. It's just the gas that's pretty easy to measure. And so we started making measurements, as I mentioned, on September 1st. And so this is hydrogen sulfide over time. And what you see are these little bursts each day, each night, every night. But in the daytime, there's nothing. You can see it's flatline. And so basically, we started seeing this, and the numbers get up to over 4,000 ppb, parts per billion. To calibrate you, typical urban concentrations of hydrogen sulfide are less than 1 ppb. So this is way too high. And similar levels, in other parts of California have been declared emergencies and fixed in a matter of weeks. So we presented to Imperial Beach Task Force, which I'm a part of. We invited the San Diego County Human Health Services to this presentation because, I've never presented my results before I published them, but this seemed alarming, for lack of a better word. And we didn't get any feedback. And so September 9th, the city of Imperial Beach, led by Mayor Aguirre, decided to have press conference to let the public know that what they were breathing, basically. And so we reported these levels at that press conference, and that was September 9th. And I made this for a presentation, this timeline. I was shocked when I saw September 10th is when suddenly the wastewater stopped. And we were told that wasn't possible. But suddenly somebody told us, we were in a call, briefing officials, and we were told the river wasn't flowing. The wastewater wasn't flowing anymore. And so I didn't believe it. We didn't believe it. And so this is the paper that we now have under review in Science. And you can see here's the ambient standard by the California Air Resources Board down here. So it's well above the standard. So when the river stopped, suddenly there was a massive change. All of these nighttime spikes went to much, much lower concentrations. And the smells went way, way down. And so this was amazing as an atmospheric chemist, which is what I am. This was an amazing experiment that I never would have dreamed was possible, except that it showed what is possible, that things could happen on a pretty short time scale, where there's a will, there's a way. And for whatever reason, someone turned a pipe or a pump on and kept the flow in Mexico. So it's not good for the people on the other side of the border, but it does show what is possible on this side of the border. So, this again just sort of shows the spikes that I mentioned blown up. And so I just want to make the take home lesson be here. The blue is the flows, and the flows are mostly at night. Again, and people will tell you that it's concerted toilet flushing, but I'm not quite buying that. But basically every night the river was turning on, And this shows temperature in the air, but the bottom line is the blue dies, crashes, and so does the hydrogen sulfide gas. So this was a really rewarding, I would say, one of the best figures I've ever seen in my career, because we finally validated the voices of the community, which it was about time. Basically, there's a correlation between the hydrogen sulfide levels and the odor complaints. We had the number of complaints per day. The San Diego Air Pollution District was doing a great job of logging them this summer, thankfully. And the correlation was 0.91. So when the flow stopped, this is the red is the complaints. They tracked the H2S. So humans, the community, was the best sensors you could have. They were as good as our, super expensive equipment that we were using. And so, as I say, when the river stopped, which is in blue, the complaints went away and the H2S levels went much, much lower. Why? Why was this summer so much? It's always been bad, but there was something extra that was happening the last couple of years. People have been complaining that it's getting worse. And so why did it get worse? Well, this just shows cumulative flow, millions gallons annually from 2002, I think 2000 up to 2024. And what you see is in the rainy season, it's just gotten higher and higher. And this is the flow through the river specifically. And so this is what they call the transboundary Tijuana River flow. But here's the weird part. This is dry season. And normally it's dry, except if there's little rain events. We get one or two sometimes. But the levels are really high. It was, when we got there, it was 80, I think it was, the highest we saw was 80 million gallons in one day flowing through the river into the ocean. 80 million gallons when it's supposed to be dry. And so, and the water is something to behold. It's strange colors and it kind of burps and bubbles. And yeah, it's not something that, you really want to be near for very long. And if you spend any time there, which, I wish more people in positions of power would do that, you become very convinced that it's just not a good thing for this community. So dry season, this is the cumulative between rainy and dry. This is just dry season 2021. Look at this. This is flow for over between April and October, dry season. So this one was the end of a rain event. So it kind of builds up and then it gets drained over time. So that's okay. And then it's dry, like it's supposed to be in 2021. 2022, there were more rain events, including Hurricane Hillary. And that's this point right here. So there were a couple of rain events, but in between those rain events, it was dry. There was no flow. 2023, it started to change. There was more flow more of the time, and it wasn't always related. Actually, sorry, this is Hurricane Hillary over here, 2023, sorry. But you can see that there's flow all the time, even if it's, not raining. But 2024 was a big difference, and these are all on the same scale. 2024, there was no rain, yet there is a constant flow. And as I say, it's between 40 and 80 million gallons per day of wastewater going through that river in that community. So I won't belabor this. It's kind of a complicated figure, but it's in our paper that's under review right now. But it drives home the point that this is actually an air quality model, dispersion model that looks at how far this pollution goes. And it uses river flow. It tunes with river flow. So we actually put the hourly river flow in. It matters. And by doing that, we actually captured, the bottom shows the daily trends. And so nighttime, you can see it peaks. In the daytime, it's gone. And then at nighttime, it starts to build back up again when the river flow picks up again. So, but if you look at, basically we picked 3 different regions or periods. And you can see September 1st through 5th, 6th through 10th, 10th through 23rd. And what you see is, it's hammering Imperial Beach, the whole South Bay region quite a bit when there's high flow. But there was a period where the winds became very stagnant. And, basically this was the super high concentrations that we saw during a period where the winds became super stagnant. It's when it got really hot in September. You might have remembered that period. But when the flow went down, there was dominant westerly winds on top of it. So it's a combination between flow and ocean and river conditions. But you can see it's much less. However, the take home here is that it reaches many, many people across San Diego County. So this is a problem for all of us to be taking very, very seriously. We had an EV, an electric vehicle, that we came in from UT Austin, and they drove around the area and measured all the VOCs. But this is just H2S, just to drive home the point. Spatial pattern, most of the burden, a lot of the high concentrations are still located in this region. You can see going up, you still run into it along the coast, but nothing like you see down close to the border. I want to point out that H2S is just the start. We're now going through this long list of literally hundreds. I think we've reached 1,000 different VOC, volatile organic carbon gas compounds, many of which are toxic, many of which are at much lower levels. So you kind of don't pay as much attention to them, but they can be toxic at low levels. And so we are carefully sorting through those data right now. So current status, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I already, let me see, I'm okay. But basically, we've surprisingly shown that a river can have a huge effect on air quality of an entire region. This, as far as I'm aware, has not been shown before. And, H2S levels incredibly high. We identified, it's coming from the river and a specific spot in the river. The belief before we did this was that it comes from these stagnant pools. Some does, but it's never as high as it is in a turbulent region. At least we didn't see that. There are other places where, low tide and other areas that get stinky at times. We need to go back and sort of document those more. More to come. We collected groundwater, or I should say San Diego State, Paula and her team collected groundwater samples, soil, water. We're looking at the whole spectrum of pollutants that are in that region. It's not just one gas. And we also conducted health surveys. The county also did. CDC came in for a short period. So there's the health data will actually be, I think, really helpful. It's more data. And then, I'm very happy that, at least it woke people up that, these are long dismissed community voices. Positive changes are happening. I mean, we've seen what is possible. It didn't stay that way for long, but it helped open the beaches for the first time in over 1,000 days. They're closed again. But, basically the H2S levels and smells went way down. And now they're starting to creep back up. Why is that? Here we go. This is the flow. I just plotted this today because I was curious. This is river flow. And you can see this is from the point when we started sampling. This is when they diverted the river. It got much lower. Each of these little spikes you see are only at night. It's incredibly regulated flow, incredibly controlled flow. So again, I'm not buying the simultaneous toilet flushing argument. There's somebody controlling the flow, and for some reason it's only going at night. You can see it drops to zero during the day, as does the concentrations of many of these pollutants, not all of them. But what you see is there's a trend. As we kind of have gone quieter, tensions kind of gotten quieter. I'm sure the mayor and others aren't thrilled about, the community is not thrilled about this. It's creeping back up. And I'm told that the stench that's there right now is awful once again, which is disheartening, but we're getting ready to go back for another intensive. And we haven't stopped sampling. So we have data that I just today provided to CDC because they are actually looking into this problem, although they told me it would take a year before they will have an answer. And that's a long time to make people breathe this air. So as the flows are going up, H2S, which is our sort of canary in the coal mine, is also creeping back up, same slope, which is, it's just not good. And I'm just going to say, this is data hot off the press that I'm just sharing with all of you for the first time. So what about this river? This is the foam, infamous foam. And in the morning, it's always there after the river's flowing with this unknown stuff. They turn it off, and so then by the afternoon, late afternoon, it's the foam. A lot of the foam has gone down. Dr. Sonati is going to talk to you a little bit. The doctor I mentioned, he helped come up with this. He came up with this list because one of the things that's happening that many people don't know about. How many people have heard of these maquiladoras on the other side of the border? They're U.S. companies that are over there, tariff-free, tax-free, probably pretty low on environmental regulations. And you recognize, if you look at these companies, these are US companies. that are saving money by being on the other side of the border, but they're dumping into the water. So I point this out because you often hear, oh, people in Mexico are polluting the water, but these are US companies and they're coming in back into the US. And so I think this needs to be highlighted more than it has been. So it's been named one of America's most endangered rivers in 2024. Um, where else? There's nowhere else in the US that has 80 million gallons of raw sewage going through it. If there was a broken pipe in LA of this magnitude, it would be fixed very fast. There's not a fish that's alive in that river. I mean, it's dead. The river is completely dead. And so where else can you look? Well, how about India? This is a foam, same combination, industrial waste and wastewater. And there's foam in one of their holy rivers. And this is a 2024 Time or BBC Picture of the Year. Again, they call it a river of toxic cloud. So it looks very familiar. But I had to go, completely to India to find something similar. So I would like to actually, hold on. Yeah, so I will quickly come back. I want to thank the team that's done the work. It's my team plus, as I say, many other teams as well. This is my group. They work tirelessly. They are equally passionate about this problem and helping the community. And I'm going to quickly hand it over because people had expressed an interest and I could comment on the health part, but we've got the luck of having an expert, Dr. Tom, who will fill us in. They recently made a visit to the White House, which he might talk about a little bit, but he's going to give us just a few minutes spiel on what he said at the White House a couple of weeks ago on the health effects for kids that are living in this area. So Tom, do you want to I'll stop sharing.
Sure.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Tom Chinati, and I'm a retired pediatrician, and I live with my wife in Imperial Beach. I've dedicated my adult life to protecting children, their health and safety so that they can feel safe and thrive and realize their potential. And it's a mindset that's going to stay with me always, which makes it very difficult to witness how billions of gallons of raw human sewage and untreated industrial waste get dumped into our neighborhoods where children grow up and go to school. So last year alone, more than the entire volume of all of Lake Tahoe of raw sewage was dumped onto our soil. And as Dr. Prather already pointed out, that the Tijuana River, it's a dry river and it should only flow when it rains. But last summer it flowed like blazes without any rain. And this means that it was all raw sewage. Now, we have a number of schools in the community, but in particular, there are a handful of schools, K through 12, within about a half a mile from the river and with about 2,000 students, 2,000 children. This doesn't include all the many daycares and the preschools either. The community is predominantly Hispanic and working class, and about half the kids live with food insecurity. Now, decades of flow of raw sewage and industrial waste has created a toxic environment where these kids live and go to school. So instead of protecting these kids and letting them grow up in a safe place, we have failed them. The toxic waste, it's in the soil, it's in the water, in the river, in the ocean, and it's in the air. And the stench is most horrible in the night and early morning hours, just when kids are getting dropped off for school. And then they're expected to go and learn. As bad as we have it on the US side of the border, things are so much worse in Tijuana, where they have, for example, 4 times the infant mortality rate than in San Diego, and a much higher rate of congenital malformations and preterm births. Hydrogen sulfide is the one gas we can smell, but it's just the marker for all the other toxins that are aerosolized. And as many of you probably already know, its mechanism of toxicity is very similar to that of cyanide. So it interrupts cellular respiration, and it basically targets cells and tissues that use oxygen and like chokes them out. And the most susceptible are the ones that have a high oxygen demand, namely growing brains. It also targets other vital organs like the heart and lungs and kidneys. And children are much more susceptible because they have a greater lung surface area to body weight ratio, and also a higher minute volume respiratory rate to body ratio. The poisonous gases and heavy metals from the industrial waste are kind of like the silent killers that can take their time to have an effect. The toxicity, it's not always obvious and acute, although it can be on the worst days, and it can cause nausea, headache, confusion, dizziness, and cough, for example. The long-term effects can include developing cancer, a whole slew of neurologic disorders, and basically diminish normal growth and development. The heavy metals can lower IQ, to put simply, which not only hurts the potential of the average kids, but also blunts the brilliant ones who could have otherwise maybe become great artists or musicians or writers or civic leaders. And to me, this is just absolutely heartbreaking. Up until now, what we've seen from our local health department and from the CDC is that they've been operating under the same paradigm that thought it was okay to add lead to gasoline, in that it's considered safe until proven harmful. But the irony is you can't find something you don't look for. And I think I know the proper public health approach is that a chemical should be considered unsafe until proven otherwise. So quite frankly, it's just mind-boggling that in 21st century Southern California citizens are subject to billions of gallons of raw sewage and that it's allowed to continue. We don't have to prove toxicity to those who live in sewage. It's self-evident. And what is not being done is screening for this, for the silent killers. I believe we should be testing kids for heavy metal exposure and conducting neurodevelopmental evaluations and basic growth and wellness checks, including screening for anemia and things like kidney function. The kids in this already disenfranchised community grow up under plenty of stressors as it is. And adding to this, that is being left to live in toxic sewage where those in charge say that it's an okay thing to do, it's just going to lead to significant and deep mental health issues. And it makes one feel disposable. Our children are left to feel disposable, and they know it. So we need to pressure those who do have the power to fix this, to do whatever it takes, to maybe think out of the box, because it's like a slow motion public health crime, actually. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you both. I'm going to change the view back to the meeting.
Very good.
And
Before we go into questions, there's a couple things I'd like to clarify. Kim and Tom, is it okay with you if we share your segment of the program with whomever we can get to that might need to hear this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Very well.
Absolutely.
And may we have a copy of your PDF presentation, Kim, so that we can
Yes.
share it with everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and I can give you a link to our the paper that's up that has videos, and it's being reviewed by science right now. So it hopefully will get accepted soon too, and that will get more attention on the problem, I hope.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm happy to share I'll share what we have with you.
Very good. Yes. Okay. Now we are going to go to questions. I think there might be a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask that anybody that asks the question, please ask your question as quickly as you can so we can get as many questions answered as possible. Let me look at who we all have here now. And
Lori Saldana is the first one who raised her hand.
thank you, Carol. Lori, would you like to take your minute shot?
Yes, there have been several concerns about the toxics. Thank you for documenting what happens when they all mix together into this very toxic soup. Are there registries that you can look at, industrial source control, either City of San Diego, which 30 years ago pledged they would work with Tijuana to help them develop industrial source control programs. So are you able to find any documentation based on those promises that the city of San Diego was making at the time this treatment facility was under litigation and for exactly the toxicity concerns?
We've been looking at more federal, toxicity sort of lists is what we're doing, what we're using. If you have like if you can send me that, I would be really interested in reading it. I'm trying to learn more and more about regulations. I know that a lot of them have been but I'm learning about what's happening on the other side of the border as quickly as I can. And I'm told that, there's different regulations over there. And so I'm trying to figure all that out right now. I've more been focusing just on the known toxicity of compounds and which ones we should be most concerned about. And we're looking at this list very carefully before we release it. I will say that. But yeah, if you have a list or promises that were made or any documentation like that, if you could send it my way via Carol, email, whatever, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you. Vanessa.
I wanted to ask about the EPA recently designated that this area does not meet Superfund requirements, but they used 2018, 2019 results or measurements. What do you think about that? Should that be really looked at again? I know it takes a long time for Superfund stuff to happen. Is this worthwhile to pursue?
So I sort of try to stick in my lane as a scientist and provide the data, but I do think we know a lot. We know more now. There was a lot known then, but we know a lot more now. And I think using the latest data, especially for what we have, would be wise. But there are other people that can comment on what is required and why it was turned down this time. I've heard different views. I think it looks like Mayor Paloma's going to raise her hand. I don't know if that's to comment on this because she's more equipped to answer it than I am.
Yeah, since she was in Washington, maybe she can speak to that.
Mayor Paloma, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. So tomorrow, the County Board of Supervisors is going to take up the item in the morning to discuss. The data that was used is outdated and it was very narrow. So I think it's because they don't have enough resources to take a strong, comprehensive look, just like Kim and her team did. This is the responsibility of the government, and that's the entire comprehensive analysis should be done before they even say yes or no. So I'll be there giving comment that we need to repetition and they need to take a second look. It's going to be challenging because I don't see EPA getting more resources under the Trump administration, but I think it's important to take that opportunity and continue to raise this very important issue, especially as it affects children, as Dr. Chinati said.
Thank you. Bethany, your question.
Hey, thanks. Dr. Prather, and I don't know, maybe Paloma, you can speak to this. If not, Dr. Prather, but do we have any theories on the nighttime dumps yet, or any insight on that?
We're working on it. We're trying to understand the flows. There's some odd flows going on, and we're trying to figure it out. Is what I can say. We are looking into it at this, as hard as we can right now. But I have not been given an answer that I find sufficient, so we are figuring it out ourselves as best we can.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I have an idea, and I would like to know if anybody's working on this. It seems obvious to me that one possible path to take that's a little bit not governmental is to organize a letter writing campaign to the companies that are spilling into on the Mexican side, and it then comes to the California side. Has anybody worked on that kind of a campaign?
Not that I'm aware of. I do feel like when I saw that list, I just saw the list yesterday. I've always heard about, stuff. When I saw it, my eyes popped open. I think that it makes sense to me I would be putting pressure on those companies and finding out what however it can be done. I would think that would be a wise thing to do. There are many activists that are heavily involved, and to me, it's not very well known about that a lot of the pollution is coming from U.S. companies on the other side of the border.
Well, I think it should be well known. Mayor Paloma, you nodded your head, yes.
Just really quickly, Senator Padilla had a bill that would fine or California owned companies that operate in Mexico. So that was put in suspension. There's an opportunity to take it back up and build advocacy efforts around it.
Very good. Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen. Okay, moving on. Ramon. You're not.
Thank you so much. I was just going to comment quickly on what Mayor Paloma just
I
mentioned.
can't hear you, Ramon. You have to speak more loudly.
Thank you. Is that better?
Much better. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on what Mayor Paloma just mentioned about Senator Padilla's bill, which is, from what I understand, basically being reframed so that that front is not being, we're still working on that front, but the goal is to try to hold those corporations accountable across the border.
Exactly. That seems like a really good idea. Mary Ellen.
I'm still willing to go down to that border and stand in front of the truck, protest in front of the trucks coming in, especially aiming it at those American companies that are down there polluting.
Yes.
Mary Ellen, I think you need to talk to Mayor Paloma.
I sent her a note. I sent her an email
okay.
offering crickets.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but I think we should do it. That's how you get attention. Letters get round filed, Yeah.
Okay, Lori.
Yes, for those who remember when NAFTA passed, which made these tariff-free zones possible, there was also an agreement on environmental protection. And there's a treaty agreement that's still in effect. Whether it's actually used, however, is another question. And that was separate from the trade agreement. And it was set up specifically to deal with these types of transboundary environmental pollution problems by corporations. So I don't know if anyone is exploring that, but it was part of the original agreement. It was an environmental side agreement to the trade agreement that put these tariff-free zones in place along the US-Mexico border.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Ramon.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna add also, I grew up next to that river valley. I played there as a kid. It was, you can go in and explore freely. And I think that's an important note to mention is that our kids can easily walk into that river valley. There's nothing keeping them from playing in that river valley or exploring. There's no signs. There's nothing that lets people know, hey, this is a toxic area or there's toxic water or polluted water. There's absolutely nothing. And that's something that we've asked the county for. And they've kind of not and haven't done anything about it. So, and I also think that Tijuana gets it worse. There's a lot of canals that are flowing into the Tijuana River from all the different colonias all over Tijuana. And for a few hotspots, there's probably tons of hotspots all over Tijuana where kids are getting sick on a daily because they're breathing in some of this stuff that's being aerosolized.
Thank you. Chris.
Just a quick note.
Chris, your hand is up. All right.
I apologize. My hand is not up.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I particularly want to thank Dr. Prather for her absolutely horrifying, sorry, Kim, but that's the truth, horrifying presentation about what is going on. We will send a copy of this movie. Well, actually, the best thing, the most efficient thing for everybody to do is go to our website in about 2 days, maybe tomorrow, even if we can get our webmaster, she's not busy with something else. We will post the video of this meeting. You are very welcome. We have permission from both of our speakers to share this information with whomever you wish to. And, let's go to work, people. We need to do something. Thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Kim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being here, and it makes me always feel better that they're to see caring people, because this is a really serious issue. And I didn't get to show like my official thank you slide, but I should add that there have been, if people are thinking about politicians that could be helpful. One of the most helpful ones from the Congress side has been Scott Peters. He actually put congressionally directed funds in to let us expand like we did. So Scott has been great. Mentioned Senator Padilla, Mayor Aguirre, I'm just thinking, Assemblyman Alvarez. It's a handful that have been really, really working hard. So when I just have to say that, because I sometimes find myself complaining like, nobody's listening, but there are people that are there. I just wish there were more. So I think the more people that know, and that's why I take the time to do this. It's got to get fixed, and they cannot wait 5 years. And so they're giving out filters now. I will say that. So there's a lot of positives going on, but not fast enough, especially if you live there. So I just want to thank everybody for their time and attention now, and anything you can do to connect people. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much, everybody. If the members of the committee would stay, we do have a few little business items that we have to clear up that I'd like to work on. Thank you to the rest of you for coming.